Hi there and welcome to Hyundai Power Products. My name's Adrian and today we're going to look at this HYCH700 wood chipper. So I'm going to take the contents out of the box, lay it out so you can see exactly what you get. So I cut the straps on the box, lifted the box off the top, and I've got the contents here on its little mini skid. So I'm going to carefully unwrap it now without using a knife so that I don't scratch anything, and remove all the individual components away from the main unit. So as you can see, I've laid some of the smaller components out on the floor here. So we got some wheels, a main foot bracket, various axles and bars and chutes, and this tube here. We have the tool kit here, which comprises 3 spanners, an Allen key and a spark plug spanner. And inside this bag, during delivery, you will find that there's some small nuts and bolts, which we'll come to later. And obviously we've got the user manual here as well. So obviously the major part of the unit is this here. So I'm going to start from the ground up. So I'm going to put the wheels and axles on and the foot bracket. So obviously I'm not going to put any fluids in the machine or anything like that. I'm going to tip it over onto the floor here. I'll probably take it off the pallet and then show you how to fit the components that go on the underside. So as you can see, I'm going to tip the unit over with the chute uppermost, and I'm going to gently lie it down, and it will just sit in that position quite sturdily. It's not going anywhere for me to get to the bottom end. So on the lower end of the unit we have a really long bolt right through the frame with a nut and washer on this end, and it passes through this black tube. So I'm going to remove these two, but they will be going back in the same sequence. So as you can see, a really long bolt with a tube in the center and a nut and washer on the far side. So I'll do that for both of them. So that's them removed. So again, in the parts you'll see these brackets. Now these brackets, one on either side, one goes this side and another one over this side. So first step, we'll put the bracket there. I'll just pop the tube back in and pass that bolt through the hole on the other side. So that's one in. Now I'll do the same with the other one, just to keep this located. So there's that one. Put the tube back in the middle, pass it right through, and out the other side. So that'll just sit there. Now of course on the other side I have to put the other bracket on. I'll just get the nut and washer at the ready. So I'm just holding the bolt in position. I'll just pop the bracket on there. If you did have some assistance it would probably be easier, but I can't manage it on my own. So I'll just loosely put that nut in position. And then the second one's much easier. Line it up, through with the bolt, on with the washer, on with the nut, and I'll just put those loosely into position. Hand tight for now. There we are. So next we have the axle, and as you can see, it's a long piece of bar, and it's got a nut and washer on either end. So I'll remove the nut and washer from one end. Now this one is actually a little bit hand tight at the moment, so what I'm going to do is take the wheel and put the axle through the wheel, the first wheel, and then through the whole assembly, right through the lot to there. I can put the second wheel on. Now just take note to put the valves on the outside. Put the nut on and on loosely with the washer. Okay, so that's everything assembled, but none of the nuts and bolts are tightened up. So now that everything's in place, I'll just tighten up the main bolt in the chassis here. Now you can't over tighten this really because it's got a tube between the two frames. You make sure that you put that tube back. So on with the second bolt. So I am using the spanners that were provided. And there are two 13mm spanners. That's those two bolts done up. So I just put the spanner on one end of the axle. I can tighten the nut on the other end. Just being very careful not to damage that valve. So now that I've got the wheels and axle in place, I'm going to lift the unit back up. I'm going to turn it around 180 degrees and lay it back down on this face. So, just give it a little push, get it back into my working area. and lower it down onto the floor. So again, much as we did on the other side, I'm going to remove 2 nuts and bolts, which we're going to use for fastening, and the big long stud nut and washer and the tube. Okay, so you'll see on the top here, these bolts are loose here deliberately. There's the outlet chute. So I'm just going to pull it down towards the bottom of the machine, and you'll see in the outlet chute, it's got 2 bolt holes in it, or holes for bolts. I need to bring that down until it lines up with the holes in the frames, as you can see here. That's the point it needs to sit at when we put it back together. So next step, I'm going to undo these 4 nuts and bolts, just put them to one side safely for the moment, and remove this grating. So everything's been put in position with the bolts loose, so that the bolts are all in the correct place, so you can't really get the wrong bolt in the wrong hole. I'm going to remove that grating and the 4 bolts. There we are. Okay, so several things to grab hold of at once here, but it can be done quite simply. I've got the black frame on the very outside. I'll just pass the bolt through. I'll just bring the chute till the bolt lines up there. I'll just hold it there for a minute. Put the tube on, push the bolt through. So I'm just going to let it hang there for a minute. Just get that bolt started in that hole, which is there, and pop the bracket onto that nut. So that's stage 1. So I'll just get a nut and washer so that it doesn't come back out again. There we are. And then using the 2 bolts we removed earlier, I'll just line that back up, put 1 bolt in, tightening the nut up on the inside, and the same on the other side, put the bolt in, nut on the inside. Okay, so at this point I can do up that long stud and these 2 individual bolts. I'm just going to make sure that I've got this bracket fairly square when I do that. I've actually changed to my socket here just to make it quicker for your viewing. Okay, that's nipped. Let me just check. Yeah, that bracket looks fairly flush all the way along there. So now that I've done that, I can finally tighten up the bolts. Okay, that's that part in position. So moving on, we have this part which needs to be fitted next. Again, it's got its bolts in its holes, nut and bolt there, and as you can see, another nut and bolt here. So I'll just undo those and take them out of the way. So there's a couple of slots in the top of here, and they slot down over these nuts and washers. In fact, I can see the nuts are well out and the washers are outboard. So you can take the nuts and washers off, but if I just carefully slide that in there, lever it down in position, you can see it's in place there. That's fantastic. So now what I need to do is replace the 2 bolts I just took out. So find the hole, there it is. Do up that bolt loosely, same the other side. And do up that bolt loosely. And as per usual, final operation, get myself the right spanners, pair of 13s, 1 spanner inside, I've got my socket on the outside. I can tighten that one up, same with on the other side. I'll just tighten those 2 nuts down, one inside. Okay, and the same on the other side. So final little bit of assembly down the bottom here, we have this L-shaped grill. So it goes down here in this orientation with the short bit facing what would be the floor. It goes inside the steelwork here, into position. I'll just pop one of the little screws back in, put a nut on it. Here we are, repeat the operation. Spanner on the inside. I'm just using a socket on the outside just to do it a little bit quicker for you viewers. We'll tighten the 4 bolts up. Okay, so last little job, put her back on her feet. So another part of the assembly is to fit this handle, 2 bolt holes, 2 holes in the bracket, and the handful of nuts, bolts and washers that came in the toolkit. These weren't bolted in. So the assembly is the bolt, then a spring washer, then a plain washer. I'll just offer the handle up into place loosely. Just start 1 bolt there. Just get it started. Here's the second one. Okay, just transfer over to the other side. So yeah, final job. I'll just tighten up these 4 bolts. So we're going to fit the side entry chute now. You can see 3 nuts here. We're going to have to remove those first. So that's the first job. Spring washer and washer. So I can take the tube, place it over the 3 studs that are sticking out of the frame. Just line them up carefully. That's 2. There we go. And I'll just place a washer, spring washer and nut. Okay, and I can tighten them up. Oop. So we've done all the mechanical assembly of the machine now, and as we stated at the beginning, this should be done completely dry with no fuel and no engine oil. So obviously, having completely assembled it, now is the time to add the engine oil. So the oil filler is here. Unscrew it anti-clockwise. Refer to the manual for your oil type, but you should pour the engine oil in here until the oil level, with this on nice level ground, reaches the weir point of this hole. So in other words, at the point where if you put any more oil in, it would start to run back out again. If it's right to the top of the threads here, that would be perfect. Once you've done this, replace the dipstick. There we go. And screw it back in firmly. And obviously, remember to check your oil before use every time you're going to use the wood chipper. So having filled the engine oil to the correct level, the next thing we want to do is put petrol in the machine. So petrol filler cap here. There is a strainer on the inlet. I recommend you leave that in case you have any foreign objects in your fuel can. And you'll see in the bottom of the strainer there's that red line. So when you fill fuel, probably use a suitable jug with a spout or a decent funnel. Put fuel in the fuel tank up to the level of that red line. So when you see the fuel come up inside the tank up to there, that would be the full point of the fuel tank. Obviously, if you spilled any fuel, now's the time to clean it up before you start the machine or let it completely evaporate. We can replace the lid and screw it down firmly. So that's the machine completely assembled. We have engine oil and we have fuel. So let's go through the operating procedures. So engine control, 4 basic controls. Fuel tap, this lower lever here, that would be on, that would be off. We have the cold start choke. This is the choke position, so you put it in this position towards the outside of the machine to start. Once the machine has started, we push it fully back towards the engine. So that's the run position. So fuel on, run on. Normally when the engine's running, you'd see the 2 levers towards the engine. That would shut the fuel off, that would turn the choke on. So it would be in a choked condition. The throttle lever is here. That's full throttle, and that's dead slow. And finally, the recoil itself. So your new chipper has 2 inlets. One for larger, rounder stock, so as it says, up to 76mm chipping capacity. If it'll fit through that hole, it'll chip it. So that's for thicker branches. And then the main hopper, we'd probably recommend this would be for foliage and bush branches, that sort of thing. General sort of bush stock up to about 10mm in diameter, and that would go down through the top. Well, I do recommend that you read the manual thoroughly once you've gone through all this procedure, just to make sure that you're up to speed with all the safety tips and what have you in the manual. Having said that, after first use, I'd probably recommend that you go right around the machine, just checking the tightness of all the nuts and bolts that we did up during assembly, just to make sure that everything's still tight and isn't going to vibrate loose. Well, I do hope you found this demonstration useful. For more information on this or any of our other products, visit www.hyundaipowerproducts.co.uk. I've been Adrian, and thank you for watching.